the top 3 strategies for how to turn $6 into a 6-figure business. Hi, I'm Tim, founder of the Online Entrepreneur Academy, and together we're discovering how to build your ultimate freedom business. So I was doing some research today into 6-figure business builders, and I did this out on a site I'd like to share with you called BuzzSumo. BuzzSumo.com, and it led me to some very interesting articles, one of which I'm going to share with you today. It led me out to Entrepreneur Magazine and a fellow by the name of Dan Scalco. He wrote an article emphasizing how he had $6 in his pocket, no experience and no connections, and within the first year of his becoming an entrepreneur at that price point, he learned some very good lessons. He said he made a lot of mistakes, of course, as well. The first lesson he learned was about using systems to scale. And he emphasized Henry Ford story most of us are familiar with, how Henry Ford didn't necessarily make the best automobile, but he knew how to use a system that was able to allow him to scale up the production, which today we call the modern day automobile assembly line. And he was so successful at implementing his system that obviously today, right, Henry Ford and the Ford Motor Company are still applying that system in a very productive and effective way. In fact, right recently when all the other major automobile manufacturers went bust, I believe the Ford Motor Company was one that was not bailed out, if I'm correct, in what I recall of the strength of their system. Number 2 was how to get past the gatekeepers. And he offered a couple of interesting strategies. Number 1, to look into the registry of a URL for the company. And by doing so, you can often find the owner's personal information and means of contacting them, from address to phone number and even email addresses. Secondly, most companies use a typical format for how their employees will have a first dot last name before at thecompany.name.com. So once again, these are ways where rather than necessarily trying to go through gatekeepers, secretaries, appointment keepers, virtual assistants, and so on, you might have an opportunity with some of these creative techniques to be able to reach around and contact directly the decision maker in a B2B type arrangement that you need to speak with. The third of these 3 tips is what he refers to as form mutually beneficial relationships. Today we've got some examples of this in high gear, you could say. Gary Vaynerchuk and VaynerMedia is high on my radar list of someone who's doing this. Tim Ferriss, who wrote the book, The 4-Hour Workweek, also is another one of these characters that is willing to just give and give and give without a need for knowing how they're going to get paid back right away. I've heard Gary Vaynerchuk refer to it as, think of an Oprah, think of very, very large personalities in the business world, and predominantly what they do is give. Of course, they're well paid. They are brought in as speakers and well-paid speakers. And yet there is something of the power of giving that is touched upon in this article that reminds me that when and if and how we are able to give with no need for getting something immediately in return, if we have the patience, if we have the persistence, then often the return can over time be far more magnified than in any way that we would try to monetize or get a certain price for our services. So do you have it in you to give and allow the return on that investment in the relationships that you can develop and build with others? And the author of this article suggests that essentially you offer to do something for somebody that you really want to build a relationship with, and charge nothing for it, right? So start by building the relationship on the basis of you giving and asking essentially nothing directly in return. And then the law of reciprocity will begin to be set in motion. And sooner or later, as the universe abhors a void, you will eventually get a return on a wise investment. So that's it for today. We'll keep it short and sweet, under 5 minutes here. We're going to continue to explore what 6-figure business builders are learning in their process of building a six-figure business and beyond. But let's start by getting to that six-figure level. I think that's a real middle-of-the-range income in the modern-day world that is very often overlooked as we're reaching for $1 million and being an eight-figure earner. How about six figures? If you're like me, that would be a reasonable stretch. Why don't we make it together? Why? Because together we overcome.